Welcome back to the Pop Chart, a podcast discussing everything at the top of our charts in pop culture this week.
I'm your host, Brenden Toda.
Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds.
I see. Mm-hmm. Seems pretty topical.
Yeah, it's right on the nose, as they say, because this week we're discussing Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. And then we're doing, what are we doing, tier list?
We're doing a tier list of all of Nolan's films as well, because, you know, every time a new project comes out for him, we always get like nostalgic and think back of the body of work this man has put into the world of cinema and how much we as movie-going fans just appreciate what he does and what he stands for. But we'll get to that later in the show. What's popping with you, Easy?
Man, okay, so finally got a chance to see Oppenheimer. Yeah. And that was a chore, I'll be honest. Now, a part of that is
context
is my fault, right? Because I want to keep the experience as pure as possible. So when a filmmaker films it in a certain way, that's the way I want to go see it, right? When Tom Cruise says go see it on the big screen possible, I'm like, you got it, Tom Cruise.
Yeah, he sent you a text. He has your personal number.
He said, listen, right? I know you've been watching me do all these things and stunts for the thing, telling people to go see it, but for you specifically, go ahead and see it in IMAX.
Yeah, James Cameron's always like, hey, Ease, make sure you see this one in 3D. And then
I know you're such a fan.
Good old Christoph. He's just like, Ezequiel, I need you to make sure you see this in the biggest screen possible. You just cannot see it any other way.
And it's interesting because these guys, you know, I'm on a first name basis with these guys, but they won't let me see a preview screening of it. I got to see it like a chump and pay for it. What the heck, you guys? No, so I held out seeing this movie until I could see it in true IMAX. That's the 5-story tall screen presented in essentially square 1:4:3 aspect ratio. And that was harder than I think it's ever been to go to an IMAX, because I think that message was heard by the cinema going fans, and they were like, well, this is the way he wants us to see it, we should do that. So for weeks and weeks and weeks, unless you were seeing it on a Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., the good seats were gone. I mean, and for weeks there were no seats at all, which was a good problem, because as a film fan, I'm like, yes, people are going to the movies. But as somebody who was like, I have to see it this way, like literally took a poll on Twitter, was like, am I being stupid and potentially missing this movie this way if I just hold out? And everyone on Twitter was like, yeah, you're a dummy. Just go see the damn movie. I was like, no, I won't.
Well, let's make this a little bit more clear too, because you know, I think the average Joe popcorn is gonna think, well, hey, I see IMAX signs on all of the theaters nearby. How hard could this be, Ezequiel? I mean, like, surely you could make it out to one of those screens, right?
So we are lucky. We live in Southern California.
Right.
We have 4. So in all of Southern California, we have 4 theaters you can go see it in this format.
Correct.
Which to us doesn't seem like, I'm like, that doesn't seem like a lot. We only have 4 choices to see it this way. That is Universal City, the AMC Universal City, the Irvine Spectrum, located in Orange County, the Ontario Palace Regal, the Inland Empire, and then TCL, formerly the Grauman's Chinese Theater. Those are the 4 options that you have. Now,
that's actually very tall, and where IMAX gets its name from, like maximum experience.
So of those 4 theaters, because this movie is so long, they can only show it 4 times a day. Unlike some movies that play hour and a half, 2 hours, and they can fill that theater up and turn those things around. You just can't do it that way. So I held out. Luckily for us, they extended its time in IMAX, literally telling other films, nope, we're essentially making too much money on this movie to pull it out of IMAX. We'd be stupid if we did that. So got a chance to see it this past Sunday. Boy, oh boy. Now, once you get a chance to see it, we'll have to talk about where you think this movie fits into his small but impressive filmography, right? We're Christopher Nolan fans. So let's talk about the IMAX.
Right.
Christopher Nolan has a lot of gall to
Dang,
essentially
Chris.
shoot
Hmm.
a 3-hour long film full of remarkably intimate scenes of men talking in rooms
Hmm.
and then say, "That's the movie. Give me the heaviest, most cumbersome camera in existence,
Loudest freaking camera.
and let's shoot it for the largest screens known to man."
Right. Right.
Uh, because on paper, this film is, like, very basic, right?
Right.
It is, uh, a biopic of a
Hmm.
man who I knew, like, shockingly little about. Like, I consider myself a connoisseur of
Hmm.
that time period of World War II. I felt like I know more than the average person because it's just an interesting topic. But I didn't really know about the Manhattan Project,
Hmm.
as I imagined. So, this was kind of a history lesson for me, and then, of course, I roll out of the screen, I'm just, like, furiously Googling things. Um, but to take a movie that, like, on paper does absolutely not need to be shot in IMAX cameras, like, not one thing, right? You
Yeah.
remember sitting in the IMAX theater for The Dark Knight, and that opening
Hmm.
scene fills the screen, and you're just like,
Hmm.
"Yes," right?
Hmm.
When he's shooting big, huge action sequence or really intense moments in films, and it pops open, you're just like, "Yes, this is what
Hmm.
I'm here for."
Hmm.
That's not how he uses IMAX here. Like,
Hmm.
sure, establishing shots of the vistas and the things and all that stuff, and obviously the bomb itself and all that stuff is presented that way, and that's really spectacular. But,
Hmm.
like, where it's used a lot is just, like, super close up on so many people being
Hmm.
so intense with one another, and I'm just like, again, similar to Tenet,
Hmm.
which, only Christopher Nolan could get away with that movie.
Hmm.
I think most people would just be like, "No, this doesn't work." But it's like because it's Christopher Nolan, people are like, "Okay, he's doing very Christopher Nolan things." I think the same thing. I think in a lesser filmmaker's hand, the IMAX would just be kind of like lost on people.
Sure.
Um, Christopher Nolan also is, besides the visuals of Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan has said many times that sound is just as important, right?
Right. Right.
My favorite movie of all time, my number one favorite movie of all time, 2008, The Fall by Tarsem, who's a
Hmm.
visually, like, uh, just incredibly visual filmmaker.
Hmm.
You can you can put that movie on with no sound, and it's sumptuous, right? There's,
Hmm.
like, works of art flickering across the screen. No matter
Right.
what scene it is, it's beautiful. But you could
Hmm.
listen to it. You could have it on without hearing anything, and it's like, wow, what am I looking at?
Hmm.
That doesn't work. Christopher Nolan doesn't work that way, right?
No.
um, Sound is just as important. Um, do you remember the scene in The Dark Knight? I'm going to keep going to The Dark Knight. It's probably
Yeah.
the most accessible film of his filmography that most
Sure.
people have
Sure.
seen.
Right.
There's a scene in The Dark Knight where Alfred and Bruce are testing out this weapon, or they're shooting bullets
Hmm.
into masonry to try and recreate to see if they could pull fingerprints off a bullet.
Correct.
From my experience, when that scene happened in the movie the first time I saw it,
Mm-hmm.
that gun fires 3 bullets. Bam, bam,
Hmm.
bam. And I felt like the projectionist in the booth was like cranked up the sound just in that moment. You can feel it in your chest. Even still to this day, when I watch it here, that, for whatever reason, that sound peaks. Like, the audio folks in that movie were like, "This scene's going to be louder than you're expecting it to be." And I'm always like, "Oh God, it's the scene. I need to lower the volume." That is Oppenheimer for 3 hours.
Oh.
It is,
Okay.
it's not an assault on your
Mm-hmm.
ears,
Mm-hmm.
but sound plays such a huge role. It's like a character in it.
Mm-hmm.
Where the sound engineers decide to put sound and where they
Mm-hmm.
decide not to put sound
Yeah.
is incredible. There are scenes in the movie where you think you're about to hear something and then you don't, or you're
Mm.
trying to hear something. I know Christopher Nolan gets a lot of shit for, like, the audio mixes and things are muffled and things, this is louder. Here
Right.
it's like it's very obvious what he's trying to do, and not in a bad way. It's just like, oh, it's not important what those people are saying because the music is crescendoing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, add that Ludwig Göransson score, which in my opinion, in the short time that he's been doing this thing, right?
Mhm.
And Ludwig has a hell of a track record too, both Black Panthers, Mandalorian.
Mhm.
Uh he's worked on 2 Christopher Nolan movies now.
Mhm.
This is, in my opinion, is his best. Um and it just crescendos constantly. Again, I'm telling you, like, this is like an action movie with not one person so much as jumping in the air.
Yeah.
But it's like the dialogue
Mhm.
is incredible, delivered
Right.
by actors who are just absolutely crushing it.
Mhm.
I try not to use the word tour de force. I hate it.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
it's overused. It's
Right.
French. Um, and I don't
I
know if
didn't know that you had something against the French.
I think the last time I used it was to describe like Leonardo DiCaprio's performance for The Revenant, because that
Revenant,
is
yeah.
truly like a tour de
Mhm.
force.
Yeah.
Killian
Won him an Oscar.
Murphy, yeah, Killian Murphy is giving the greatest performance of his career.
Mhm.
He's in literally every shot.
Mhm.
um, but like Robert Downey Jr., who I knew was in this movie, but did not know what a pivotal role he would be in this movie.
Mhm.
He's in it for far more than I think most people are prepared for, or at
Mhm.
least I was. I thought he was going to kind of be pop up cameo, get his maybe like best supporting actor role and get the hell out of here.
Sure.
No, he's phenomenal. Emily Blunt, incredible. Florence Pugh always elevates the movies that she's in. They're all giving like career defining performances here.
Mhm.
Um, but the experience of it all, right? It is not a perfect film.
Mhm.
Nor do I think it's Christopher Nolan's best film.
Oh, interesting.
It's not my favorite Christopher Nolan film. My favorite Christopher Nolan film has been for many years The Prestige, which is
Mhm.
still my favorite film.
Mhm.
But Christopher Nolan is like an entertainer, right? He toes that line of like along the same lines of Tom Cruise,
Mhm.
where we're just here to entertain you, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes Christopher Nolan, in my opinion, gets a little bit too big for his britches, like Tenet. Like I walked out of Tenet the first time being like, am I dumb? Like this movie made me feel dumb.
Mhm.
And I still watch that movie and it was like, yeah, I just don't know if this one is the thing for me, right?
Right, right, right.
This movie is more my speed, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
But it's the experience of it all, right? It's not a perfect film. It is very, very good.
Mhm.
Um, but it's the experience of seeing it uh literally as big as you can. Like I have 3 cinematic experiences that like I can recount vividly in my head,
Mhm.
right? So 1, Jurassic Park.
Mhm.
8-year-old Ezekiel's film mind just click, lit on fire, right? And I was like, this movie made me become a lover of movies. Fast forward to Avatar,
Mhm.
right? Avatar, what you would agree, is not the most perfect film ever made. It's
Mm,
far
not
from it.
really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say. I would say
But the
so.
experience of that, I knew you would never get outside of this movie theater, right?
Right.
You're not
Right.
going to have the same experience watching it at home, which is why I went to the movie theater 6 times to see that movie, because I knew
Mhm.
it could never quite you could never quite recreate that again.
Right.
My third cinematic experience that I think I will keep with me forever is Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer.
No kidding.
It
Like even
is
compared to his other filmography, which we're going to look at.
sure, it is
This is
a wonder to behold
wow.
at this scale. Like
Mhm.
again, they're holding this movie to the end of the month, so people have like 2 more weeks to see it in full IMAX, and
Right.
it would be laughable if they didn't come back later in the year
Right. Like
with
when
a
it's Oscar
re-release of it.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when the IMAX screens are not taken up by big budget blockbusters.
Right.
Um and it's this movie again on paper is not a blockbuster. It's not.
He shot it like a blockbuster when it's just people
Yes.
in a room. He tried to give you a roller coaster experience by giving you the walking tour of garden.
Yes. I just don't know if like again, it's got all the Nolan flourishes, right? Um but like if you I feel like if I'm reading the script, I'm not going IMAX baby.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna blow people's minds and eardrums all at the same time. You're like, no, this is a pretty almost not, I wouldn't say paint by numbers biopic, because you can look at movies like,
Like, would you call it a
Bohemian Rhapsody or
biopic?
Ray or something. Yeah, I don't, it is. It fully is, but it doesn't feel like it sidesteps that kind of formulaic biopic rut that a lot of movies get kind of tied into. This is not that, and that's
Mhm.
where I think Nolan comes in and elevates this more than just your standard, like, you know biopic.
Mhm.
But this is like, I might sound super pretentious here.
Mhm.
FYI, I for the most part love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The last year and a half have been really disappointing for the most part.
Been a little all over the place,
Yeah,
yeah.
they just kind of a mixed bag. But when Martin Scorsese gets on his high horse, and I love when he does it, and he talks about the difference between a movie,
Right.
right, and a film.
Right.
This is what he's talking about.
Mhm.
Like, there are the theme park attractions,
Right.
and then you walk out of a Christopher Nolan movie and you're just like, that is that's cinema,
Mhm.
right? You're like, this is what he's talking about. But
Mhm.
he operates similar to that, like, right? Big blockbuster, big show, right? The advertising's out the window and stuff like that. And he's using, the same budget to get something like that. Like, if you said you can watch this movie for the rest of your life or pick a Marvel movie, as much as I love so many of those Marvel movies, and
Mhm.
they are endlessly rewatchable,
Mhm.
I'd be like, you can give me this movie all day long, because
Gotcha.
it is just, it's great. Again, it's not perfect. I don't think it's his best film,
Mhm.
but my oh my, the experience of, like, I fully plan to see it again one more time in a different format, like maybe just Dolby or a digital IMAX or something like that. But to
Right.
see it on film in 70 millimeter,
Mhm.
to experience it, is one of those things that I will not soon forget. It is kind of astonishing.
Comes
So,
highly recommended. Yeah.
oh, I could not recommend this enough. Now, yeah, is it 3 hours? Yep. Does it feel like 3 hours? Nope.
Well, I mean, like, just in the proposition of it, based on the parameters that you set, it kind of sounds like a math problem, to be honest. One of those riddles that you're used to seeing on the SATs. Ezekiel wants to go see the new Christopher Nolan movie. There are 4 theaters showing it in the Southern California area, covering a 40 square mile distance, and the movie lasts 3 hours, allowing for 4 total showtimes. When will Easy see the movie?
Right.
Like head in hands, like,
Yes. Just
whoa, okay, what's the right answer?
yeah. I mean, I watched this movie in a time where I would normally never go to the movies.
Sure.
Sunday night before I go back to work.
Back
Are
to
you
work,
kidding me?
right?
Like, this is
A
not
3 hour
usually
movie.
like
You
what
just
I'm trying to
settle in.
do.
Did you
Yeah.
go solo?
I did not. A friend of mine from work,
Okay.
Manny, went and saw it
Oh,
with
okay,
me.
okay, okay, okay.
Now Manny loves Tenet, right? That's his favorite
Okay.
movie.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about that, as
So, like,
Tenet might be,
pause, stop, wait.
yeah.
His favorite movie, period?
No, no,
His
no.
favorite
Favorite Christopher
Christopher
Nolan.
Nolan
Yeah,
movie? Okay.
favorite
Because I
Christopher
was
Nolan.
just gonna be like,
Yeah,
bro,
yeah,
wait,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
good, but
There's a lot of options. Yeah,
yeah.
it's his favorite Nolan movie, and I think that's one of the reasons maybe why this feels so out, like, so not standard Christopher Nolan fare, because
Hmm.
usually he's doing big concepts, right?
Right.
Like, this is the follow-up to Tenet, which
Correct.
is arguably, he shot for the moon on that one,
Hmm.
and did so, that movie is crazy. And then it's like literally back down to earth with
Okay.
something that's very like, just present, and it's a real story about a real guy doing
Hmm.
real things, right? There's no black holes, there's no time heists, there's none of that shit in this.
Right, right, right.
It's just a very straightforward movie, and that, I think, is maybe turning some people off. It's like, where's the
Yeah,
crazy Christopher Nolan ideas?
it's usually, yeah, he usually layers it like that, right?
Mhm.
It's not just a Batman movie, it's a Batman movie as, like, mixed with Heat, or, like,
Right,
a
right, right,
crime.
right. Yeah.
not heist, like a gangster kind of film, I guess,
Hmm.
almost. And then, like you said, with Inception, it's like, it's what if it's a dream and a dream and a dream, and it's also an analogy for making a movie where you've got the producer, you've got the actor, like it's high concept, and this is relatively low concept, where it's just like you
Yeah.
said, it's like this guy existed, and here's his story, and then everyone's waiting for that like little spin on it, and no, that's it.
Yeah, and I think the spin is not, it's the reality of this man who created something that changed the world and
Hmm.
what his name next to that meant, right? The
Right,
thing that this man created ended up killing thousands of innocent people.
right.
Yes, it ended the war, but it's the living with that. It's the getting to that point. Like the first half of the movie is getting to that point. Then it's
Hmm.
like, hey, we can do this. And then the second half is the fallout of that, is
Mm.
him coming to terms with the thing that he created
Hmm.
being used in the way that him and many of the scientists on the Manhattan projects were like, "Er," like that's, yes, it's all about, we needed to have it because at least we could decide what to do with it, whereas like if it were the Nazis, you'd know exactly how they'd use it.
Right.
And then we ended up just doing that exact thing, and
Hmm.
the movie deals with the choice that was out of his hands at that
Right.
point, right? He was
Right.
like, I gave it to you, the grappling with the but we don't need to use it, right? At By the time that the bomb was ready to go, the war in Europe was over, and that's what
Hmm.
we were trying to stop. And then it was
Hmm.
like, well, the Japanese are still at it, why don't we just go over here? And the film, the decision making in the film, I don't know how accurate this is, but it's so it's so heavy. It's just these guys sitting around a room, just like on, almost like on a dartboard. What city are we going to? There's a general at one point. He goes, well, we're not going to go in Kyoto because of the historical, um like we're gonna not blow up Kyoto
Hmm.
because of the historical stuff that goes on in Japan, all the history there, and also my wife and I summer there, so we definitely don't want to do that. And it's like, just like the nonchalance of this, of this power that these people have, that they're going to now use it to destroy people or
Hmm.
themselves. So it deals with a lot of that stuff, and I love that. I really love the kind of bookends of that movie, where it's like at the first half of the movie, you're just like, science is awesome. And you're just like, this is so exciting. And then
Hmm.
as soon as they do their first test, the film completely changes tone. Like
Hmm.
you're in the theater feeling it, going like, oh God. You're a little bit triumphant, right? As an American, you're just like, yeah, we did it. Yeah, we did. And then you're just like, oh, how did we use it again? Remember how we used it? It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
shit. And the film fully goes head first into that.
Mm.
And so that, again, that's where like a lesser filmmaker, it would just be pretty standard fare. Let's see what Oppenheimer was like when he was a kid and what event led to him doing this. It's like, no, 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 no. That's
And this
that's
is
not,
when
this
he
movie does
wrote
not.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Correct. Exactly. It's like, no, we find, J. Robert Oppenheimer fully science nerding out on physics and all that stuff. And so,
Right.
yeah, high recommend. Go see it. Try and go see it in the next 2 weeks when you can see it in an IMAX. Um,
We're
yeah.
likely going to see a lot of Oppenheimer cosplay for Halloween this year, you think?
Yeah, I do think there's gonna be people who are gonna be like Oppenheimer, people who are gonna be the bomb. Like
Yeah.
there's for sure people are doing it. Yeah.
Couples costumes like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'll pay
exactly.
to see that. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, um, seeing as that sounds like a pretty succinct review of the film, why don't we move right along to uh Christopher Nolan's tier list?
Let's rank
Let's see
these
here.
suckers.
I know, huh?
How many movies are we ranking? We're doing, he's
I
got
do
10
I do
or
believe
12?
he's got 10.
Okay, he's
Hold
kind of
on.
right up there next to Mr. QT. And I was telling you when we decided to do this that he might be one of the few directors. I know that he doesn't have as many films as like a Scorsese or a Spielberg or anything like that, but Even like Tarantino, who only has, I think, 10 movies. I've missed one. There's one I have not seen. Um, but I think I am a completionist when it comes to Christopher Nolan movies. Yeah, looking at them now, I'm like,
Right.
yep, that's it right there.
Should just be about everyone. So why don't
Yep.
we start with the most recent one, seeing as you're the one of the two of us who has seen it. From amazing, great, good, okay, bad, terrible. I'm gonna guess that you're probably hanging out around this area, somewhere between amazing and great.
Yeah, for Oppenheimer,
For Oppenheimer,
I would
yes,
say it's great. Yeah, it's
it's
great
great,
for
real
sure.
great,
Yeah.
real great.
Mhm.
Um, partially for me personally, like I've seen all of his films with the exception of these two, Following and Insomnia, which I believe are very early in his career. One of them being his student film, isn't it?
Following. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Um,
What's it about?
you know, I have seen it twice. Uh, and I wouldn't be able to give you like a solid synopsis for it.
It
um,
sounds pretty much like a Christopher Nolan film. Like what's it about?
you're like, you know what? Guess.
It's a
Just make something up.
movie.
Just make something up. Yeah, I feel bad
Movie.
because it is his first film. Now, I remember seeing it, watching it. Sometimes you can like tell on a filmmaker's like first movie that like,
Hmm.
ooh, these people, this guy's gonna be amazing. This person's gonna be amazing. Maybe you
Hmm.
revisit it after a couple of movies. You're like, see, it started there. The seeds were planted. I remember watching Following, going, I don't see it. Like, and I had seen Following way late. You know, like he's like
Sure.
6 movies deep. I go finally watch the
Right.
Following, and I'm like,
It's
well,
all
all
right.
right, you know, like good for you from going from the Following and Insomnia, which is a good movie, but you don't quite see it yet, really, until you get to like, I guess essentially like Mementos, when things you're like, oh,
Yeah, I would say it
Christopher
kicks
Nolan's
off
here.
there.
Yeah.
So Following, okay,
I would put
bad,
Following in okay. I don't think Christopher
just
Nolan has made
okay.
a bad film, so I think those last
Agreed.
two,
Agreed.
that we're not going to put anything there, but I think Following is okay. Um
Ins-
Insomnia, I think, is, I haven't revisited that film in a long time.
mhm,
But I think that movie is pretty good. From what I do remember of it. I remember that you do start seeing like his cinematography on display there, like where he likes to put cameras. He likes to go to cold places and get these really nice
mhm.
sweeping vistas and stuff. That's like his establishing shots. And so that really starts happening in Insomnia.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So far we've got a great, a good, and an okay. And I think this is probably where most other people also enter into Christopher Nolan's filmography with Memento. Um, Really interesting concept, more of like a murder mystery, I would say, a detective noir, if you will,
Yep.
perhaps, where the main conceit of the film is the main character just doesn't remember, he has no long-term memory. He only remembers like things in the short term, and then as soon as it crosses that threshold into long-term memory, immediately like resets and he's like almost a whole new person.
Yep.
So he remembers things through pictures like what in the poster, Polaroids that he takes, and tattoos that he's written all over himself with reminders, and he finds his own clues. And it's very interesting because the subject of the film is also the detective and also involved in the murder mystery, and it's
Hmm.
really like mashing and mixing it all up. I find it extremely compelling. And ironically, I did not see it first of Christopher Nolan's filmography.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
pretty sure I saw it third once already seen Batman Begins and Prestige prior to that, probably.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Sure.
Yeah. So I ended up seeing it third, and I was just like, man, this guy just hits it every single time out of the park.
Every time.
Like, how does he do this? But yeah, Memento. Where does it fall in the category of Nolan films for you?
Yeah, this movie is great. I again, this is where like the Christopher Nolan of it all comes in. If
Hmm.
you presented this movie linearly in time, right? This is when he really
Yeah.
starts to play around with time, which is like a huge part of every single one of his movies.
Hmm.
Um, this is like pretty straightforward. Like this would just
Yep.
be like pretty straightforward thriller. But the way it's presented, working its way backwards from the literal end of the film to the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, that's when you're like, okay, this guy is doing something pretty unique here. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would put this up there in great.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
this is like when somebody asks like, oh, Christopher Nolan recommendations or something like that, people are gonna obviously go to the big ones, the one that everyone has seen, right? Inception,
Right.
The Dark Knight, you got to go see this one. um I will sometimes be like, listen, I'll always recommend The Prestige to you folks, but
Right. Right.
see Memento, and if
Yeah.
you like that, you'll like everything else he's doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think there's a really great scene. I want to say in about that middle point where if you're like having a hard time grasping the concept of the film, where it's just like, so you're telling me the main character doesn't remember what he did, but he's also trying to figure it out. So he's trying to like figure himself out at the same time. That sounds a little weird. Where there's a moment where he's chasing someone and then realizes, oh no, he's chasing me,
that's
and
right.
then immediately
Yes.
turns around and runs. And
Hmm.
it was that moment, that context where I was just like, this to me, that's his style to me.
Never seen
Where
anything like it.
never
Like,
seen anything
okay.
quite like that, where
Yeah.
it's just it flips the whole context on its head. And that I would say that that's also a running theme with his work is context, right? So you
Mm,
talk about how this movie begins at the end, which again is not necessarily a new concept in filmmaking. We've seen it
sure.
with, you know, like Spielberg and Tarantino and
Yep.
Scorsese, but it's just like the way that he brings in a fresh context the second time you see the same thing, and you're like,
Yes.
oh,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and like, you know, even when you know that that's what he's doing, like he is in Memento, the satisfaction of the viewing experience just second to none. So I think that actually segues nicely into what would become his next film, if I'm not mistaken, right? Which is Batman Begins, right?
Yeah.
He was working on The Prestige when they approached him to take over this Batman film, which, by the way, I believe 2005, right? Not too long after Batman and Robin was a colossal failure and just kind of ruined the Batman franchise for a long time. Yeah, this movie is coming up on 20 years ago having been released, which
Oh,
is shocking.
that hurts.
Yeah, but the span between 97's Batman and Robin and 2005, well, you know, now I need to look it up for sure.
Right. Yeah.
But like is not a very long period, right?
No.
Uh
No.
so yeah, 2005. Your
Yeah.
thoughts on Batman Begins?
I I'm like a on a what is this called? Teeter-totter seesaw.
Yeah.
Every time the Batman film gets the Nolan trilogy gets brought up.
Hmm.
Obviously, I think we can all agree The Dark Knight Rises is the lesser of the three. And I
Oh,
think
hey,
most
hey,
people
spoilers. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
right, right. But I think most people immediately shoot The Dark Knight to the top of the list. That is sometimes how I feel,
Hmm.
but I think maybe like 70% of the time, Batman Begins is my favorite of Nolan's Batman films.
Hmm.
Yes, it treads the same kind of territory that previous Batman films do, the telling of the Bruce Wayne character and this and that and that.
Hmm.
Um, but at the time, I was very into Batman. Like all the comic books I was reading them.
Hmm.
I was super heavy into just Batman stuff. And so when this one came around, and like I'm gonna say something here. Similar to the Star Wars movies, I grew up with
Uh-huh.
a certain trilogy. So that trilogy
Right,
is
right,
my
right,
favorite
right, right,
trilogy, and
right.
it's the prequels.
Hmm.
I grew up with the Schumacher Batman films, so those have a
Right.
soft spot in my heart.
Right.
Yeah, you say there it was the death of Batman, and I say sure at the box office and creatively
Yes.
probably, but when I watch
Yes.
those movies, I just have a hell of a good time. This movie changed all of that, right? To up until that moment, I was like Schumacher forever. I love these movies. They're
Schumacher
so good.
forever.
They're campy and they're terrible, and I love them. The one-liners and the zingers, give me more, because that felt like Batman to me.
Sure,
And
sure, sure.
then Chris Nolan came out with this movie, and I was like,
Yeah.
what other Batman movies are there? Like, this is I was like, this is perfect. This is my Batman
Right,
right here.
right.
Please let this man make more of these. And he did.
For sure. I
So
mean,
for
like, yeah, just real quickly, because like we're not too different in age. I believe you're like maybe 2 years younger than me, but we're in the
mhm,
same generation, went through some of the same experience. Talked about it when we were covering the Turtles recently, like
yeah,
right in the same sweet spot there. Yeah, when it comes to the Batman movies, Schumacher's, I wouldn't say I hated them. I remember being of that age, and they're definitely aimed at us
yep,
of at that age, where I remember watching some behind the scenes where they're talking about being toyetic, and as an adult, toyetic comes off more as a derogatory term. As a child, I want all of Batman's gear. I want,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I want a cowl and a cape, and I want the Batmobile, and the Batmobile lights up now. I mean, like, come
yeah,
on,
yeah,
like that's
yeah,
amazing. But yeah, this is a very different take. And I remember honestly being the opposite of you. And it was a phase where I was not loving Batman. And I remember seeing ads for this in the posters. I was like, they're doing Batman again.
again, sure,
And they're doing it
gritty and dark
like,
again.
do we
Yeah, yeah,
have to be like, it looked like a poser, like was trying to take on Batman.
I
And then
could
I
see that.
remember, yeah, and then I
Like, watch
remember
the trailers. Like, go back and watch. They're not
seriously,
great. They
they're
don't
not
really
good.
sell it. Like,
No, they do
yeah, more
not.
Batman. It's like, oh god,
This
I
again.
totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
It's the same story with just a new sheen on it, is what it
Hmm.
looked like in the trailers. But I remember sitting down to watch this film, and we've talked about it a couple times on the pod so far, is just like when you find a film that connects with you and that seems to understand the character in a way that perhaps you did and you didn't know it, and it like unlocks that thing within inside you. That's what I remember the viewing experience for Batman Begins being like, of like,
Hmm.
I've never seen Batman presented in this way
Yep.
before. I've never considered this aspect of his character being so central to what defines him, and I've never seen it taken so seriously. And that was refreshing and exciting. And what's interesting now, looking back on it, yeah, like what, 18 years on, uh, uh, like this is also a movie that I can show my son and
Mm,
say this is a definitive take on Batman, because like not only is it great, but it doesn't actually do anything, in my opinion, that makes it unsuitable for younger children, right?
sure. Yeah.
This it hits everything. It's got a Batmobile, it's got a Commissioner Gordon, it's got him beating up thugs, and it's got a super villain trying to do something mischievous, but like
Yeah.
ultimately is not necessarily like, he's not trying to kill people, which
Yeah.
again like makes it suitable for so many different audiences. And that's why for me this has to be in the amazing category.
I'm with you
Like
100%, sir.
Batman Begins
Yep.
is just amazing. And you know what, to your point too, like it usually dances between The Dark Knight and Batman Begins when it comes to his Batman films. I would argue Batman Begins is a much better Batman film, whereas The Dark Knight is a much better like crime film, or you could even
Yep.
call it a Joker film, but like it has less to do with Batman of why The Dark Knight is good. So
I'm
that's
with
why
you on that
Batman
one.
Begins
Fantastic. Yeah.
is
I'm
amazing.
with you.
Which brings us to, I think maybe not so subtly, your favorite of the list, The
Listen, man.
Prestige.
Yeah. So this is maybe besides maybe following
Mm-hmm.
and Insomnia.
Uh-huh.
This is probably the movie people have seen the
Forgotten.
least.
Yeah, forgotten about.
Right. Yeah, I think when you're sandwiching Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, and
Mm-hmm.
in between there was a movie that Christopher
Mm-hmm.
Nolan did that stars Wolverine, Batman, and Black Widow.
Yeah,
Um,
it's true.
and I think I remember when that movie was coming out, people were like, "Whoa, look at these! Whoa, oh my god, what a cast!"
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of those years where there was dueling movies very similar. So we had The
Correct.
Illusionist come out with Edward Norton and Paul Giamatti.
That's right.
Poor man's The Prestige. But they could not be more different, right? So this
Right, right,
movie is
right, right.
about essentially dueling magicians, right? And
Mm-hmm.
magic is like one of my favorite things. I love magic. I wish I could do magic.
Mm-hmm.
But like any chance Cynthia and I get, we're just like, let's go to a magic show. Let's do something with magic in it. We're just
It's
suckers for magic.
magic.
This movie is about dueling magicians trying to one up each other, trying to figure out their secrets.
Hmm.
Um, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah, it's not just
Um,
what if Penn and Teller hated each other, right? Like
correct.
it's way more than that.
It's yeah, where do you get the willpower? Where's the line? It's the willingness to really sell it. Um,
Right, which actually is reference to the title. Like, what does the title even mean? The Prestige, if it's about magic.
yeah, the prestige is the trick, right? The actual trick, right? There's a magic trick has three acts.
Mm-hmm.
The pledge, where you
Mm-hmm.
tell somebody this is what I'm gonna do. The turn, uh, when you do the thing, and then the prestige. That is the trick, and that's
Mm-hmm.
when everyone goes, "What the hell?" Um, this is more than just a movie about two dueling magicians. It is really well acted. The score is incredible. There's some guest stars that pop up in this movie that make it a little bit more just guys doing card tricks kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
the
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of fantastical element is in play in the prestige in a really remarkable way. I just remember, and still to this day, right, there are a lot of mic drops in
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Nolan movies. um I think one specifically we'll talk about in Dunkirk, or at least I think it's kind of mic droppy.
Mm-hmm.
um the prestige the prestige conclusion is Christopher Nolan's greatest mic drop. Where with these characters, you think one of them has the upper hand on the other one, literally until the end of the movie, and you're just like, oh, the lengths that some people are willing to go for
Mm-hmm.
greatness.
Right.
And yeah, The Prestige is my favorite Christopher Nolan film, and one of my favorite films of all time. I've got the words that open the movie and close the movie. Are you watching closely?
Watching
Tattooed right
closely.
onto my arm.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, if you have ever been on the fence about it, if you're hearing about it for the very first time, I highly recommend you seek out The Prestige. It is, in my opinion, Christopher Nolan's finest achievement.
Absolutely amazing for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Uh yeah. So that I think brings us to 2008's The Dark Knight, which, its reputation precedes it. Um in the history of Batman films, it is still looked at, I think, as the gold standard, right up there with perhaps the original 1989 Batman,
yep,
and has yet to be equaled, in my personal opinion. I very much liked the Batman,
yep.
but it does feel like in certain parts of the Batman, it's a cover band version of the Dark Knight, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, I get to see that.
no shade. I mean, I guess that is shade
It's
thrown to
it's a
Matt
major
Reeves.
shame
It's major
because listen,
shade,
Matt
but
Reeves is the man.
he's the
That movie is
man.
great,
It
but
is, and so are Planet
I'm
of
with
the
you.
Apes. All three of
Yeah.
his Planet of the Apes
Oh,
are incredible, which we'll have to
mhm.
look at eventually for the pod.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
my goodness, it almost felt like they went, "Hey, instead of blue, let's go red. Call
Right.
it a day, right?
Right,
No,
right. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it."
Yeah.
Yeah, the incredible, incomparable Heath Ledger
Mm,
and his contributions to the Joker. uh my goodness, the idea that his casting generated any sort of controversy prior to the release of the film.
right. We
um
were all so stupid and
Whoa.
short-sighted. We were all just
So wrong.
on that.
Yeah,
We were all doing that, like, well, Michael Keaton wasn't the shouldn't have been Batman, but look what he did. I'm like, Heath Ledger, are
yeah,
you kidding me? This kid?
right,
And
this
then
guy.
you get what you get.
Exactly. Like, I feel like maybe McConaughey at his peak, like, rom-com, would have been a comparable, like, choice. If you said he was playing the Joker, you'd be like,
I'm out.
bro, what? Wait,
Yeah,
why? Tell
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Explain. You need to explain yourself.
This is
But
the kid
like,
from 10
that's,
Things I Hate About You? Is that
yeah,
what we're doing here?
the Knight's Tale guy.
Yeah,
Like, that's
yeah.
what we're getting for the
Mhm.
Joker, and yet, we couldn't be more wrong. Like you
Could
said,
not.
this
Yep.
movie is honestly amazing. Almost seems like it sells it short. There's so much going for it between the expanded character relationships from the previous Batman installment, the direction it takes the character both through the film and after at the consequences at the very end, and then this the overall presentation of pure chaos energy that is Heath Ledger's Joker. I love this film. I eat it up. Yum 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 yum.
I remember where I was when I saw it. I remember the conversation after. Um, Obviously, during that time, it was kind of a weird time to be excited and go to the movies.
Yep.
But man, this is one of those ones where you can watch it at home and it all kind of floods back to you. Like,
Yep.
man, there's times where I wish I could time travel and just go see that again on opening night for the very
Mhm.
first time and be like, this is amazing. Yeah.
I remember, ironically, the Dark Knight released the same year that the Marvel Cinematic Universe began,
Yep.
and we got Iron Man in May, and we got the Dark Knight in July. And I remember going to see Iron Man with the crew, and this trailer playing in front of Iron Man, um, and just looking over because at the time, Micah and I, we had a pretty firm. I'm a DC guy. He's a
Yeah,
Marvel
yeah, yeah.
guy,
Yeah, sure.
and just going like, listen, man, this movie might be good and all, but that's what we're getting for DC. And just listen,
Uh,
man,
oh
how to
shit.
how the tables have turned, or
Right.
how
Yeah,
how different I play for the different teams. Speaking of flipping from blue to red, my
for
goodness.
sure. 100%.
Yeah, but anyway, that's it's so interesting that the both of those movies came out at the same time, but yet one went in one direction, the other went
Completely different.
completely out. Yeah.
Yep.
But I don't think it'd be any controversy to place this also in the amazing tier for very different reasons from its
Yep.
colleague of Batman Begins.
Mhm.
But that next, I believe, takes us to 2010's Inception. Inception. Explain, what is this movie about?
Oh,
What
time
isn't it
heist.
about? Yeah,
Uh,
time heist.
mind heist.
Yeah,
This is about
9 years before they
dreams,
did it.
about
Yeah.
stealing things in dreams,
Hmm.
getting access to people's psyches and using that to take things from it. Here's one of those other movies where you're like, well, I've never seen that before, right?
Yeah, yeah.
He's done it. He had done it up to that point a couple of times where you're just like, never seen anything like that before. Never seen anything like that before. But the scale at which that changed, it went from like 0 to 100 real quick with
Hmm.
Inception because almost every single sequence in that movie is like, what is this movie? I remember the trailer just like breaking
Right.
records. I watched that building, that city street fold in on itself 100 times in the trailer before I watched this movie. And then watching it in the theater, I was still like, holy shit. Like you've seen this happen 75 times in the trailer. I'm like, I know, but
Right.
whoa, look at this thing.
Whoa. Yeah.
Um, Inception is just a movie that is I've never seen anything presented like this before.
Mhm.
Great performances from really he's starting to build out this cast of his that
Right,
he'll
right, right.
use over and over again to some degree. Um uh this is our maybe no, I mean he's worked with now Killian Murphy at this point 3 different times. He'll work with him
Hmm.
again another handful of times.
Right.
Um this movie is that one where we talked about at least I remember. I'm sure you can go back in something that I've either written or spoken about and said, "This is the high watermark for blockbusters now."
Hmm.
Right? So we were getting this cinematic universe, we were getting all these things, and I remember walking out, I think, and maybe like Thor and Captain America had already come out, and I was like, "So what? Like, so what?
And
This is how you do this, right?
mhm.
This is the thinking man's blockbuster, right? This is when Christopher Nolan started to make us feel smarter than we actually were and
Yeah, yeah,
confident that we knew what he was talking about and knew what he was doing. And then we had
right.
endless debates over is it a dream or is it not?
Yeah.
Completely missing the point that it literally doesn't matter.
Right, 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 right,
um,
right.
but I remember walking out of this movie being like, hmm, I must be a cinephile because I get it. I love it, and it's gonna make $1 million, and that is what you should all you directors, if you're gonna consider yourself a blockbuster filmmaker, give me something like Inception.
You're doing it wrong,
Yeah,
yeah.
to anything else is wrong. This is when, like, the fanboy term in me was just like, "I'm a
For
Christopher
sure.
Nolan fanboy now."
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, to me, Inception is the beginning of the studios giving him carte blanche to do whatever it is that he would like. And
Yep,
it starts here. And progressively, as we get through the next few movies in his filmography, he just continually steps over the line and keeps pushing that carte blanche as being like, okay,
yep.
if you're going to let me do anything, I'm going to do a movie about dreams that's also kind of about filmmaking, that's also kind of about me. And I'm going to cast the most handsome actor that all the girls want to dress basically like I do and comb his hair like I do. I'm not going to say that,
Right.
but my name starts with a C. His last name starts with a C. I mean, like,
Yeah.
to call it a vanity project, I think would be a little trite, but like I would say Inception is the beginning of his vanity projects plural, where
Yeah,
it's just it's about him. And that's also the interesting part about Inception as well, is like at this point Nolan is the selling point, right? The other instances prior
yep.
to this,
It
there's
was the
something
Batman,
else.
it was
It's
built
Batman,
in.
right? Or
Mhm.
like even with Prestige or Memento, it's the concept that sells you on the film. But starting with Inception, Nolan is the reason you pay your money and you go sit in the theater.
When it comes the trailer, the director of The Dark Knight,
Wow.
and you were like, "I don't care what this movie's about. I'm buying my ticket."
Wow.
Yeah,
Still influences trailers to this
to
day,
this day. It
like
was
the
a
foghorn.
yeah,
But I don't think it's controversial to say that Inception, amazing,
amazing.
completely rewatchable.
Yep.
Which I think from this point forward, we're only looking at maybe controversial projects from him. Like as we just previously discussed, he was 4 out of 4 in like incredible, transcendent, amazing projects. And not to say
Peak.
that, yeah, and not to say that the other 4 are not great movies in their own right. But at least in my opinion, they don't hit the batting average that these 4 represent in this chart, because one right after the other for more than, what is that, from 2005 to 2010, like a
Mhm.
5-year period, just everything this man touched turned to gold, platinum, diamond,
Yeah.
like amazing. So it saddens me to say the next part is The Dark Knight Rises, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
t- take it away. I can't start this one.
Yeah, so I will start off with the good. Obviously, with
Right.
the tragic loss of Heath Ledger after The Dark Knight, or before The Dark Knight came out.
Hmm.
The idea was that storyline would in some way continue, right? Heath Ledger would still be one if not the main central villain, and that didn't happen, so they had to pivot away from that. I don't
Hmm.
think the pivot was bad.
No.
I think Bane is a really interesting character as well. And I remember this one being like, okay, he did a whole bunch of IMAX for The Dark Knight. Here we go again. He's doing even more for this one. And I remember in front of shit, I forget what movie they were playing the prologue to The Dark Knight Rises,
Yeah.
the airplane heist
Yeah.
scene in front of something. I forget what that was. Um, and I went to the theaters 3 times to watch that movie, whatever it was, and I think twice just to see this, like, 6 to 7-minute sequence from The Dark Knight Rises.
Hmm.
So, expectations were through the roof,
Hmm.
and that trailer I remember being very good, going like, "Oh,
Yes.
man,
Yes, I
this
do.
is going to be an absolute banger."
Hmm.
Um, and the movie just doesn't really could not maybe live up to the hype. It's not a bad movie. Um, it has its moments of brilliance. This is when sound to me was like, holy shit, this guy is like no joke with the sound. And again,
Hmm.
some of that issues with people not liking the way he's mixing sounds they basically changed the entire audio track for that first segment, because I remember in the prologue that we're showing as a preview, you could barely understand Bane. Barely.
Right. Right.
So people complained about that. In the final film, it's a totally different mix.
Hmm.
This movie is fine, but you can't call it The Dark Knight Rises if there's no Dark Knight in the movie, right?
Yeah.
Like he's Bruce Wayne, and like a shabby old busted up version of Bruce Wayne for like
Hmm.
90% of the film.
Yeah.
And you can go back and say, well, in The Dark Knight, he's not Batman all that much either. Well, it's like, well, yeah, that movie's like 3 hours long. So
Yeah.
but like I wanted a lot of Batman in this one, and this really, Nolan's trilogy is much more like a Bruce Wayne centered
Right.
type of thing.
Right.
So I don't fault it. I don't think it's a bad movie. There is moments, I remember being pretty choked up at the end,
Hmm.
um, and being like, okay, well, you know what? If this is how it ends, this is how it ends. I'm okay with this. As a whole,
Hmm.
I think this trilogy is really really great, but Batman Begins and The Dark Knight are the superior films, whereas like this one kind of gets lost in the shuffle. I wouldn't be able to, like, I could beat by beat walk you through the first two. This one
Hmm.
I'd be like, oh,
And then this happens, and then this sort of thing.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think you absolutely nailed how I feel about it too. There's not a lot of Batman in my Batman movie, and that's kind
Hmm.
of weird. It's almost as if you went to get like a sandwich like filled with meat, and it just has like, the thinnest of thin turkey in
It's
there,
called
and you're
Meat
like,
Lovers, and there's just
yeah.
a thin, super thin slice of deli turkey in it.
Yeah, come on. Like the this is not what I paid for.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with telling the story about rebirth and recreation, but he effectively does it twice in the movie. He rebuilds himself, gets beaten down in the middle, and starts all the way over
All over
again.
again.
And it feels like, almost a video game where you're just starting, you were at level 7, 8, and then you have to start all the way back at level 1 again. And, that doesn't always feel good. And
No.
to me, it feels there's a good portion of this movie where it feels like a waste of time, I hate to say.
Yeah.
But the good things, there is some pretty sweet Batman action. I do really love the performance that uh Bane,
Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy, I was gonna call him Mad Max for a second, is giving. And
He,
as
man, that guy every movie. That guy
yeah,
goes 110%.
yeah,
No
it's true.
difference in this one.
Sure seems that way.
Hmm.
But yeah, like he even with the muffled voice, it's distinctive and it's memorable, and dare I say it, is iconic.
Yeah.
Is wonderful about this film. But the bad is just all over this, and I think that's the problem that I have with The Dark Knight Rises, is that if there were more good, I could ignore the things that are bad. Like, why do the police go into the sewers? All of them,
All of the police go into the
all of them,
same. Yeah.
and they don't die. You keep
Right.
them alive in the sewers for literally why?
Hmm.
Why?
Yeah.
I don't understand that. How does Batman get out of that hole?
Sure.
How did he fly home when he
Right.
had
Right.
no money?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't understand. What happened? So Bane brought a dead body onto the plane, and he crashed it because they would expect a corpse, but then they wouldn't check, but they pumped blood in. So much of this is just like
It's a lot.
it doesn't make sense, and it's hard to ignore. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost as if the bad got turned up loud, and it's like I'm trying to ignore it and I just can't.
Hmm.
And so for me, this actually falls under okay.
I'm
I don't think it's very like
I'm comfortable putting it in okay with you.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's good. I don't think it's great. It's okay. It's
I fully
okay.
accept that rank. Yeah. That's fine with me.
But if memory serves, that takes us next to outer space, right?
Yes.
Speaking of Matthew McConaughey being the Joker,
Hello. The
Nolan,
McConaissance right here.
yeah, exactly, right?
Hmm.
This is 2000 and what, 13?
So I will start by saying, if you asked me where I would rank this after I walked out of the theater for seeing it,
2014, excuse me. Yes, 2014.
I would have told you that that is not a good movie.
Oh,
Yep.
you don't like Interstellar.
No,
Or
if you had
didn't
asked me,
didn't like it.
yeah, this is the biggest swing that I've ever had, I think, just with any movie ever. Um, for whatever reason, my first watch of this, I was like, "Oh, well, it had to happen eventually." Right? Nolan was gonna make bound to make a stinker. And you know
Don't
me.
let me leave, Murph. Don't let me leave.
You know I love sci-fi. Love
Yeah,
sci-fi.
yeah.
But for whatever reason, this one just connected not one bit.
Hmm.
Um, some of the concepts presented felt a little highbrow, like, here's Christopher Nolan, right? I'm coming off this high of Inception, like, I'm smart. And then I watch Interstellar and I'm like, fuck you. This is no. Um, and so I think I would have probably put it like bad. I think I was going around like telling people like
Wow,
that
it's
movie guys,
bad.
that movie sucks. Like, don't waste your time. Nolan has lost it. Um, it was maybe what did you say? 20.
2014.
Okay. Probably 6 or 7 years. I think only recently did I
Whoa.
rewatch it for the second time.
Really?
When I tell you that I had
Mhm.
a transcendent experience watching it the second time, and
Mhm,
I went in going like, "I gotta give this another shot." Like, I feel like
mhm.
maybe I'm missing something because people talk
Sure,
about it like
sure.
it's the second coming of Christopher Nolan, and I'm like,
Yeah, that's
"No,
weird.
I what movie did I watch?"
Right.
Put this one in, and I was like, "How how did I have it so wrong for
Right, right,
so
right,
long?"
right.
Um, Interstellar kicks so much ass.
Mhm.
It still deals with concepts that, they're not as accessible as
Right.
other things are, right? Like,
Sure.
whereas Inception dealt with the high concept thing, it did it so well that was just like
Mhm.
not spoon feeding, but just enough to make sure, hey, you're gonna watch this again, but not because you didn't understand it, because you need more context to get more answers. Whereas
Right.
Interstellar didn't do any of that stuff. It was just like, this is the movie, figure it out. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think maybe that frustrated me the first time. I was like, I want you to help me more. Um,
Mhm.
so watching it a second time, and I was like, what? This movie is kind of phenomenal. Like, this is a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
film.
Yeah, I believe the behind the scenes mentioned that they not only partnered with a real astrophysicist, but they published papers based off of the findings that they uh, basically calculated for this film in order to generate what a black hole would look like on screen. Like
Yeah,
they had to actually do the math and do the homework. And Christopher Nolan loves showing you that he did the homework, is what I would say. Um, that's what
because
this
now
movie
the,
is.
the idea of the black hole is the vision of what many believe it would look like is from this movie.
From this movie. It's not
Yeah.
the opposite way, which is just mind boggling for me. Like, just it's in a bottle somewhere down the river. Like,
Yeah.
how
Uh-huh.
how you spent this much time and money and resources, but in that's kind of a sneaky thing that he does, right? Like he's actually kind of bettering the human condition
Yeah.
by making entertainment not just to entertain the masses but like doing actual research. So kudos to him for that. I think we kind of skipped over it though, but Interstellar is about not just going into space, but the earth is dying and we are looking for suitable habitable planets, and it
Mhm.
gets real super sci-fi in the third act where we make contact with fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional beings, if I recall correctly.
Mhm.
And Matthew McConaughey travels through time and space through his bookshelf at home. Wild stuff.
What the hell?
Um, but very entertaining as well, and like beautiful movie to look at, in my
Beautiful.
opinion, even though it is a little bit like in that saturated, like not too colorful type of thing, but it
Oh,
feels
yeah.
genuine and authentic, and I would put it in the great category.
I'm
What
I'm
about?
with you. I think this movie is great. I think it was bad, then it was great very quickly.
So after going into space and kind of like going crazy, Chris, yo buddy Christoph went back and back in time, if I'm not mistaken. Back to
Grounded.
yeah, grounded. And this is World War One? No,
World War II.
World
It's a
War
World
Two.
War II epic.
World
Yep.
War Two.
About the Battle
Uh
of Dunkirk and the soldiers stranded out there.
yeah, didn't even
Um,
realize that, with Oppenheimer and
yeah.
Dunkirk both happening around there. Well, it just occurred to me. So yeah.
So Dunkirk is again. um in a lesser filmmaker's hand would just be kind of a World War II epic, a
Right.
really interesting one.
Hmm.
But again, our buddy, our pal Chris, and his love of screwing with time,
Hmm.
presents this movie as like three separate stories happening all at once, or maybe not all at the same time. But this movie, kind of straightforward, deals with time, three different things happening across this area that then intersect at a moment that
Right.
felt like what you were explaining in Memento, where
Right.
you see something happening and then it's like, wait, boom, turn around and do this thing. Memento, you're watching it going, okay, cool, all right, cool. This is really great, really interesting. Ooh, this is very tense. Ooh, this is, and there are three different things. And at one point, everything kind of goes. It's floating around each other, right? These three different things, and then at one point it just goes like this.
Right. Right. It's
And I
like the
remember being
a
like,
docking sequence.
"You son of a bitch, you did it!" Right? I was like, I wasn't really sure when it was, how it was, and this just happened. And at
Hmm.
some point in the movie, I was just like, God, he's so good.
Yeah.
He's so good. Like this is a great film too. I wouldn't say I wouldn't call it amazing.
Hmm.
Um, he does amazing things with it. He's telling a a true story or the only way Christopher Nolan can really do that. And when everything kind of fits, you're left. I was left speechless. I was like, "Yep, I knew it wasn't just going to be a standard World War II movie. I knew you were going to do something interesting with this, and how you were going to, show us this." And I think Dunkirk is really, really great. I think that's another one that some people have skipped.
Yeah.
I don't think I would ever recommend you like double featuring Dunkirk and Oppenheimer. I think that's too much. Um,
That'd be a lot.
that's a
Yeah.
lot, because they're both heavy films. But if you have not gotten around to see Dunkirk, I think you do be doing yourself a disservice by keeping it off your list.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's just for Nolan completionists. I think it's
True.
for anyone who is interested in the subject matter. Unlike perhaps like what was it, 19 for the one shot movie from a few years ago,
17,
1940 17 1917.
World War One. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. This is kind of similar to that. I think
Yeah.
of Nolan's stuff, it's the one I've rewatched the least because I don't really care to put myself in a war headspace all that often.
Sure.
And that's what he's really good about is like texture and atmosphere in this one, where the second this movie starts, it's just a different kind of chaotic energy where
Yeah.
it's more like a panic, if you ask me.
Yeah. This one, you're
Um,
right. I forget that this movie just starts,
yeah,
and
and
you're
it
like,
stresses me
oh
out.
god. Yes. Yes.
And the three different time periods you were alluding to, I believe one takes place over the course of like a day,
Hmm.
one takes place over the course of a week, and one takes place over the course of a bit longer than that.
Hmm.
The portion that's on the boat is like the day, the air is a bit longer, and the sea is like the
That's right.
longest time
Earth,
period.
air, sea. Huh?
Yeah. He
Oh,
tried
this guy.
to cover it, tried to cover it. But yeah, it's a really intense movie, and I'm pretty sure like you forget like Harry Styles is in this one, if I'm not
He's
mistaken.
pretty good.
He's pretty good
He's pretty good.
too. Yeah. So while I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with calling it amazing
Mhm.
because it doesn't transcend film like his others do, or like make you question like what did I even see, or I'm a super smart cinephile. It's good, worth checking out. Borderline great. I'd be comfortable in either category personally, but I kind of lean more towards good than great. What about you?
I think if I think this movie is, I'm trying to think like if I would tell like, yeah, that movie is good. Yeah, that movie is great. I think Dunkirk is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll put it in
I think
great
it's great.
category,
Yeah.
which segues to perhaps the most contentious
Yeah.
entry into his filmography to date, excluding Oppenheimer, because like it seems like Oppenheimer is getting unanimous praise even from you. So Tenant. The movie, again, about time, but how we perceive and experience time, traveling forwards and backwards. And I'm gonna say that this is the movie, talking about vanity projects, where Nolan is the farthest up his own ass that any of his films prior don't even come close to touching. This is the vanity project where it's like, oh, you're gonna give me money to make a big summer blockbuster. I'm gonna do whatever I feel like, and you're just gonna have to take it.
You're gonna
And
rue the day you gave me all that money.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And there's like, it's inside and out. And it's like, this I'm super clever with this title and the way I'm presenting it and all the things contained within and how I'm showing it to you. It's just he's so far up his own ass in this film that it breaks at certain points for me.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite, and the distracting parts can be quite distracting.
Yeah,
In
I
my opinion,
should not there's a benefit of like watching it at home. You can pause, you can stop, you can,
you can
I have to go to the
subtitle it.
bathroom, I have to put
Yeah,
subtitles on it to do that
yeah.
thing. Um, I ventured out into the world during COVID to see
Mm-hmm,
this one,
mm-hmm.
and I came home and I was like, Ugh,
Why did I just risk my own health
yeah.
to
I
do
was like, what was that
that?
even worth it? Like I could
Yeah,
die out here. Um, then that was a day and date release, right?
right,
Back in, so it was available on HBO. So similar
right.
to like how I saw Dune, I went and saw Dune, and then immediately, well, for very different reasons, I came home and I was like, and I put Dune back on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tenet, I was like, what?
Yeah,
Watched it a couple times, had to pause
yeah,
it just because I was like, no, no, I don't think I'm on the internet. Explain this one. What am I missing here?
right, right, right.
You could, there are things, again, you're just like, God damn, he's good at showing us stuff we never even thought we would see.
Mm-hmm,
Spinning bullet out of the drawer kind of thing. You're just like,
mm-hmm,
this is so cool. I wish I understood what the hell you were trying to tell me.
mm-hmm,
Um, and it is spectacular. The action sequence, the money is right on screen the entire
mm-hmm,
time.
mm-hmm.
It's still a movie I would, unless I was trying to one more time, trying to put myself through it and say, okay, this time I'm gonna get it because I have my Tenet for Dummies book over here. I've got the
Mm-hmm.
Reddit blogs over here. I'm
Mm-hmm.
ready to understand this movie. There's a
Yeah.
part of me that's like, I don't think it's worth it, man, to
Yeah.
try and
Yeah.
understand this movie. Like, let the movie be what it is. It's fine. Maybe this one's not for you, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I don't think it is. It hits the lows of The Dark Knight Rises. So I would say that this probably falls into the good category.
Because just the concept and the execution of it, there are things to behold in this movie that
For
will
sure.
blow your fucking mind.
Yeah.
Um, I, so I'm fine with it being that's a good movie. You
Yep.
got to really dig deep here.
Yep.
There are really great things happening, and then but as a whole, the movie's just kind of like, okay, that exists. Awesome.
Yeah, and I think what it is, and when I say that he's just kind of overthinking it himself, he's previously taken really difficult concepts and explained it in such a way that you feel like you understand, just like you
Yep.
said with Inception. Um, but in this one, I feel like it crosses the line way too far into, I'm just going to explain to you what this is. And once I'm done, you just accept it. And
Yep.
then you're like, well, hang on, I've got follow-up questions. And he's like, no, we're just moving forward. Like, just accept it. And
Yep.
that happens frequently enough that it's distracting to the film, and why I want to like it more than I actually did. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's only pretty good.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, just to recap for the audio only listeners, amazing Batman Begins, Prestige, Dark Knight, and Inception. Great Oppenheimer, Memento, Interstellar, and Dunkirk. Good Insomnia and Tenet, and only okay Following and The Dark Knight Rises. I'm pretty happy with the way this list kind of shook out. Like,
Solid. Solid.
well, that seems pretty fair and accurate, if you ask
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I
Oh, right.
am. We'll have to give you the floor once you get around to seeing
Oh yeah.
Oppenheimer,
No, yeah, and
because
there'll be a
I
follow-up.
definitely want to know, your thoughts on that, especially, and maybe you come back and say, "Hey, that movie's amazing. We got to move the tier list up." Who knows? Who knows?
I will definitely let you know. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this week's episode of the pod.
Yeah, thank you for listening and for watching. You can find all of our back episodes on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, what's the other one, Spotify. You
Spotify.
can also watch the show on YouTube at youtube.com/at the Pop Chart Pod.
And yeah, that's gonna do it for us this week. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Nice.